Hi everyone, my name is Vanessa Wallace. I'm a program coordinator with Canadian Women in Sport. I am so pleased to be joined today by three women within the Boccia Canada community. We're going to be discussing leadership and gender equity within the sport. I'd love to take a moment to have everybody introduce themselves, share their role in the sport, and let's begin with Sandy.
So my name is Sandy Hermiston, and I am a former president of the Canadian Cerebral Palsy Sports Association, which is part of Boccia Canada. I was president from 2002 to 2017, so I'm enjoying watching what's going on now, but I'm not actively involved because I'm not living in Canada right now.
Fantastic, thank you for sharing. José, would you like to go next, en anglais ou en français?
Bonjour, mon nom est José Malo. Je travaille dans le milieu du sport et du loisir pour les personnes handicapées depuis l'âge de 17 ans. J'ai fait beaucoup de groupes et j'ai travaillé avec toutes les personnes, peu importe le type de déficience. Depuis plusieurs années, je suis à la direction de l'Association québécoise de sport pour paralytiques cérébraux, donc principalement avec les gens du Boccia. Et je suis aussi membre du conseil d'administration de l'Association canadienne de sport pour paralytiques cérébraux.
Fantastic, a lot of experience. It's incredible. Jade, last but not least.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade Werger. I'm the sport development coordinator with Sportability BC. I've been with Sportability for about just over 4 years now. And one of our sports that we oversee is Boccia, so that's how I'm involved. We hosted the 2019 Canadian Championships here in BC and Victoria, which gave us a lot of that high performance experience. And prior to that, I attended the national competition in Newfoundland, which gave us a lot of great tips and insight into the sport. And actually, my husband's now a national referee because of my involvement and coming with me to Newfoundland at that time. So, and also my father-in-law is a provincial referee now too. So we've kind of brought in a few more people into the community.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a whole family affair now. Fantastic. So one of the reasons why we're here and something we want to discuss that we are fully aware of at Canadian Women in Sport is that 1 in 3 girls or young women leave sport prematurely, whereas 1 in 10 boys leave sport prematurely within that teenage learn to train age group. José, I'd love to ask you, what are some of the barriers that exist in sport that lead girls and young women to drop out of sport prematurely, and particularly girls and women with disabilities?
Je crois sincèrement que le milieu du sport paralympique fait partie de la société en général. Alors, les filles et les femmes du Boccia sont les filles et les femmes du monde, les filles et les femmes du Canada et du sport. Donc, toutes les embûches que peuvent rencontrer les femmes et les filles dans le sport, comme l'encadrement, le support, l'encouragement, la promotion, les modèles, avoir des modèles pour avoir envie d'aller plus loin, ben, elles se butent à toutes ces barrières-là. Et en plus, les barrières sont plus grandes parce que moins de promotion pour les sports paralympiques, moins de visibilité en général, donc encore moins de visibilité pour les femmes du milieu paralympique. Évidemment, toutes nos jeunes femmes vivent aussi des transformations physiques, doivent assumer ces changements-là. On peut vivre avec des blessures, on peut vivre avec des problèmes pour avoir des assistants sportifs parce que notre clientèle a besoin de gens. On joue avec des gens qui nous assistent. Donc, je pense que les difficultés se multiplient, mais elles ne sont pas complètement distanciées des barrières que les filles et les femmes vivent dans le sport.
Yeah, thank you for that. Definitely a lot of learnings from sport and society, and one influencing the other. Sandy, could you speak to who plays the biggest role in keeping girls and women in sport?
I don't know how to identify that, but I think that there are a few role models that can help keep girls in sport. Of course, primarily if they have the good fortune to have parents who are able to be involved, they can have a tremendous influence on encouraging girls to stay in sport. It's a lot of peer pressure comes at that 13-year-old age range where kids want to quit. And, you know, sometimes the parents just need to be there for them and step up for them. Now, not everybody has that influence in their lives in the same way that you'd like them to. And I think that there are other role models that can help there. And that would, of course, be the coaches and teachers and you know, even some of their own peers, if you can identify someone who has some influence. But from my experience, parents can be really influential, and particularly when it comes to disability sport, because parents are often more involved with their children's sport career when they have a child with a disability.
Thank you for sharing that. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And we know that positive sport community can be so beneficial to increasing retention. Jade, I have a question for you. I'm wondering from your experience, and you can draw on Boccia and the other sports that Sportability offers, but what are some of the most impactful considerations you would share with coaches who want to create a safe social environment for girls in sport?
I think with girls or just kids in general, if we're starting at, you know, that young age, is just have fun. That first experience for kids really makes the impact on whether they're going to be interested or they're going to try something else, or even if they're going to participate in sport at all. And a ton of that just comes with just having fun and not making it too serious, and make sure everyone's comfortable. And then just being, you know, supportive and hearing. I think we don't often ask enough kind of what kids would like to do. And with our roles, it's not intentionally to, you know, we're just kind of, we're built that way, or what we've learned in our experiences. We offer what we think would work and go from there. But I think even just, especially that initial experience for kids and getting involved is just maybe getting an idea what their interests are and incorporating that into the game. So for instance, if somebody's interested in dinosaurs, you can incorporate that into, you know, the boccia game and learning those skills, and that just makes it that much more exciting and fun to be at, instead of sometimes we like to say, well, they could be the next Paralympian, and that's not for everyone, and that could be a little overwhelming. So I think it's just, yeah, keeping it fun and really drawing people into the sport and learning, you know, in that environment.
Yeah, you have a couple of really, really strong key ideas there. And I know from a colleague at the Sport for Development facility where I coach at, they offer a basketball program, but it is entirely about Pokemon. Like they've just completely folded that in as a theme, and it gets the kids coming back each week to a virtual setting, which is really challenging to keep kids engaged. So Jade, definitely resonating with a lot of what you said there. José, j'ai une question en français pour toi. Pouvez-vous donner des idées de votre expérience en tant que membre du conseil et comment les femmes peuvent influencer positivement le sport au profit des filles et femmes grâce à ce rôle?
Merci. En fait, être sur un conseil d'administration, c'est aussi un défi sportif. Je pense que les femmes doivent se retrouver à tous les niveaux de direction, tant dans les directions générales, les conseils d'administration, les comités consultatifs, les entraîneurs, les assistants. Donc, je pense que le fait qu'il y ait des femmes sur les conseils d'administration, nous pouvons aussi être des modèles, bien que moi, je ne vive pas avec une déficience physique. Mais ce qui est important, c'est qu'on ait à cœur la place des femmes et les femmes doivent représenter les femmes et on ne doit pas baisser les bras. On ne doit pas prendre pour acquis que les filles, c'est comme les gars, puis ils sont là. Je pense qu'on doit toujours garder le drapeau levé face aux gens qui travaillent avec nous dans les conseils d'administration pour leur dire, est-ce que ce qu'on fait comme programme répond aussi bien aux femmes qu'aux hommes? On le sait, c'est clair maintenant, il y a des différences, là, on ne va pas se compter d'histoire. Donc, je pense qu'on a une responsabilité de gestionnaire, de s'assurer d'une saine gestion d'une association, mais aussi de s'assurer qu'il y a toujours ce qu'on crée répondre aussi aux besoins des femmes autant qu'aux besoins des hommes. Et je pense que c'est un peu notre rôle en tant que gestionnaire au conseil d'administration de l'Association canadienne ou dans mon poste de travail permanent. Je pense qu'on a ce devoir-là de surveiller.
Et pour continuer cette idée-ci, il y avait une femme qui regarde cet enregistrement, qui est intéressée pour joindre un conseil administratif. Qu'est-ce que tu lui disais comme encouragement ou oui, un conseil pour faire ça?
Pour les femmes qui observent plutôt que les femmes qui s'engagent, je pense que c'est important de se dire qu'il n'y a pas d'âge, premièrement, pour arriver sur un conseil d'administration. Je pense qu'on ne doit pas arriver quand on a les cheveux gris autant que les miens. Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de place pour les jeunes. Je pense que la façon de voir la vie, la façon de gérer les organismes, la façon d'amener du professionnalisme, ça passe aussi par les jeunes femmes. Alors, je pense que souvent, les femmes ont tendance à hésiter face à ces postes-là. Souvent, on va dire une femme de 40 ans va se sentir aussi prête qu'un garçon de 25 ans pour prendre des postes. Alors, je pense qu'on doit dire, let's go les jeunes femmes, il y a de la place pour vous, c'est très possible. Et l'autre point, c'est que si on ne le fait pas, nous, personne ne va le faire à notre place. Alors, moi, je pense qu'il y a de la place pour tout le monde, puis même, je suis prête souvent à céder ma place pour les plus jeunes et à être un mentor parce que on doit faire équipe et pour aller de l'avant pour les femmes.
No, that is such a great reminder. You know, if it's not you, then who else is going to do it? Thank you so much for that. Sandy, coming back to you, and again, also looking at that decision-making level, since your time with CCPSA, what are some of the major milestones in that partnership with Boccia Canada? Like, what are some milestones or some learnings that you could share with coaches or sport administrators that could be applicable at the grassroots level?
Wow, that's a big question. CCPSA, of course, started out dealing with all sports with focus on cerebral palsy as the disability. And that was the medical model that a lot of how sport developed really in Canada was via the medical model. And so I became involved just as that was starting to switch, where Sport Canada had said, basically, we're going to go with a sport-driven model and the people with disabilities will be integrated. And so one of the things that happened, and I think, you know, has a risk of happening even today, is that it isn't always easy for kids who have disabilities to be integrated into these programs. And sometimes it is really nice to have a safe space to go and try things where people are comfortable with your disability. And certainly I saw that. I have a son with cerebral palsy, and I saw him. He was involved in athletics, you know, as a young teenager, and he didn't have a lot of track meets to be able to go to in Alberta. So he was running in able-bodied track meets with the kids his age. And kids were laughing at him because he ran funny. And that's not a very safe feeling for kids. So at the grassroots level, what you don't want to do is be laughed off the track. And I don't know, you know, my son is quite old now, so I don't know if things have changed, but I think there needs to be some safe spaces for kids with disabilities, and sometimes just for different genders as well, to have some space just for themselves. And sometimes we lose that in all of this idea of integration. And there's got to be a balance, I think.
I think you do make a great point. To me, that draws on the idea of equity and equality. And, you know, through equality, if we're offering everybody the same thing, then okay, we should be great, but we all have completely different life experiences and completely different needs. And I think you make a really great point in creating that distinction and being able to offer a plethora of opportunities. Okay, so Jade, you began your coaching and sport career as a hockey coach before moving to Sportability, where sledge hockey is one of the programs that you oversee. What's some advice that you would give a coach who is moving into that space, or a learning that you had in that transition?
So are you talking if somebody's new to coaching or new to sport?
Yeah, new to coaching and new to adaptive sport.
Yeah, I think so. I'll kind of start with the new to coaching. I guess some advice I would give is just like take in as much learning as you can from, you know, your assistant or head coaches and other coaches, even in other sports. You can learn a lot of things from that, and just being open to that. It will definitely help you grow as a coach. And I think it takes a long time to essentially find your coaching style. I mean, for me, I think it's like my belief is I think it should be fluid. I don't think you should be stuck with, well, this is how I coach, because things change, teams change, players change. And being flexible with that, I think it'll just make you a better coach. And then in terms of getting into coaching with disability sport, from my experience with able-bodied players to disability, and I'll speak to sledge hockey just because hockey was my sport, and just in my experience how that was kind of a transition, because that is kind of a nice part with my position is I can get on the ice with the players and even help out at different camps with my knowledge. Specifically, I'll again speak just to hockey right now. And really, I mean, for me, it was kind of exciting because although they're not drastically different in terms of rules and things like that, just trying to coach as a stand-up player and coach somebody in a sled, I have to think about, you know, the movement's different. So for instance, obvious one in sledge hockey, you don't skate backwards. So in terms of defense, if you need a gap up or you know, which means basically you're closing off the space between you and your opponent to check them. You don't just pivot and turn backwards. You got to work on those angles and swinging to kind of gap up in that way. So it got my brain going of, okay, if I want, you know, if I'm going back to my experience of coaching girls that play stand-up hockey, okay, this is how I would do the drill, but how would I do that in sledge hockey? And so it got me thinking more and thinking about what drills and skills are applicable to sledge hockey. And so it was a nice challenge because I was able to be creative with that. And then actually I did coach the provincial team for Boccia a couple years ago when we were kind of in transition with our provincial coaches. And actually that's when Michael got involved because he was helping me in Newfoundland. And so then I was able to use my coaching knowledge and skills I had learned in other sports. And really, I don't think a lot of my, I guess, strategy necessarily, or how I coach changed. It's just knowing the sport and knowing the skills. And yeah, I think that kind of makes it easier of coming up with, you know, how can I build these skills for these athletes and these individuals. But in terms of disability, if we're talking specific with disabilities, that was definitely a learning experience for me. And often what I do is I just ask the athletes, like what's comfortable for you, what works for you, because again, I'm getting to know them, and it's different for anybody. Even able-bodied sports, I would do kind of the same thing. So yeah, I think everybody knows their bodies best, and so for me, if I wasn't sure, I'm at a position where I'm comfortable asking people those questions and building those relationships, because where I'm coming from is to help them, not to assume and try and do things that might not work for them, which could cause frustration. So I jumped around a bit there, but hopefully that sums some things up.
No, I think that was really valuable, and I think definitely your feedback around starting that conversation about, okay, what works best for you, and just trying to leverage that. And again, that's really a lot of what we try to do in sport, and those takeaways is like leveraging those life skills that already exist, because you get to play sport for a certain amount of time, but you're still somebody in society. Sandy, building off of that, do you have any recollection of coaches from your son's time in sport and like positive things that they did to really, like, the words, really, affirm his role and his belonging in sport?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest influences he had was Dr. Earl Church. He's given his life to coaching athletics mainly, but he was such an inspiration to my son when my son was at a very impressionable age, and he was so encouraging and so positive in terms of feedback. You've got to keep working on this. You can do these kinds of things. He just had a way about him that inspired his athletes, and offered this message that it's possible, and just keep working. And he was really good he coached both able-bodied and athletes with disability, and he was really good about being alive to some of the issues that the athletes with disabilities had that the able-bodied athletes didn't face. We were once at a meet in Edmonton, and there was a potential record in an indoor discus event, and it turned out that they'd gotten the wrong discus, so the record wouldn't count. And I can remember how incensed Dr. Church was about that, because he said the athletes took it so well because they're used to being disappointed. He said if an able-bodied athlete had the wrong implement, they would have gone crazy. But this particular athlete said, oh well. And he was so angry about that. And his passion for the athletes and his insistence on the expectations be the same for whether it was an event for athletes with disability or whether it was an event for an able-bodied athlete were just quite inspiring. He's in our Hall of Fame. He's in the Paralympic Coaching Hall of Fame. I worked with him. He was our executive director. After I met him at this event, it ended up that he ended up our first full-time executive director. And he was really absolutely pivotal in how CCPSA developed, and just an inspiration.
Sandy, thank you for sharing that. And the word that jumped out at me from that anecdote about the meet was advocate, and just having someone go to bat for you in a really strong, demonstrative way like that is really powerful. And I'm sure you're not the only person who remembers that moment. José, I have a question around young girls transitioning through puberty and how that impacts their sport experience. And I'm wondering what sort of supports do you think would be valuable for girls as they, grow in height, and everything else that comes along with puberty?
Effectivement, tous les changements corporels imposés aux femmes sont assez différents que les changements corporels imposés aux hommes. Si je pense à la clientèle de Boccia, les personnes sont dans leur fauteuil motorisé. Donc, chez les hommes, on voit qu'ils grandissent, qu'ils prennent de l'expansion, les fauteuils grandissent. Chez les femmes, on doit considérer aussi le changement corporel apparent, les seins, la façon de se tenir, la figure, mais aussi les menstruations, les cycles menstruels, les hormones, les réactions de la femme face à certaines situations. Je pense qu'on doit en parler parce que souvent, on oublie la sexualisation ou le genre des femmes en fauteuil roulant. Souvent, on ne s'imagine pas qu'ils ont une vie, bon, on va dévier, sexuelle, mais en même temps, la vie que notre corps nous amène comme femmes amène des changements. Puis on pourrait facilement oublier de le considérer chez les gens qui sont lourdement handicapés. Je pense que c'est un élément important qu'on doit considérer dans la façon dont on travaille avec les athlètes. À ce moment-là, on revient à peu importe qu'elles soient des athlètes en fauteuil roulant ou n'importe quel type d'handicap ou des athlètes sans handicap. Mais c'est important de se mettre en tête que ces filles-là deviennent des femmes et ne restent pas des petites filles en fauteuil toute leur vie. Ça, c'est hyper important. Puis peut-être que j'ajouterais avec ce sujet-là que souvent, dans les sports comme le nôtre, où ce sont des sports mixtes, plusieurs sports paralympiques, au début, c'est mixte. À un moment donné, quand on arrive à un niveau supérieur, c'est pas mixte. Mais au niveau du boccia, pour le moment, c'est encore un sport mixte. Alors, je pense que dans la gestion des entraîneurs, dans la gestion des assistants sportifs, des physios, des spécialistes, des médecins, de toute l'équipe d'encadrement, on doit être capable de dire que la fille, she's not one of the boys, comme on dit. Elle n'est pas un gars de la gang. Et ça, c'est important. Je pense qu'on doit vraiment, même si on est dans un sport mixte, considérer les différences, autant physiques que physiologiques chez les hommes et les femmes.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, and it comes back to something Sandy mentioned. Excuse me, Sandy mentioned previously about, integrating, not always being the most optimal for everyone. Sandy or Jade, did either of you have anything to add to that response from your perspective?
I really liked José's comment about it being some sort of a compliment that you're one of the boys, and how we need to stop talking like that, that's not necessarily a compliment, and that it doesn't advance what we as women should be doing, because we don't want to be one of the boys, we're one of the girls. And I just really love that in terms of what José said, and I believe that with every fiber of my being.
Incredible. Jade, as a coach or someone really close, working really closely at the grassroots level for sport programming, is there any other language that you want to see retired from sport for the purpose of inclusion and welcomingness?
I can't think of off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm guilty of it too, still just stuff that's, kind of ingrained, or that's kind of the only way I learned how to explain things in sports sometimes, especially being at my age when I started playing on a boys team, because there was enough girls playing, and I played all the way up until I was a teen, and there's enough girls my age playing, but I mean, I think just kind of build off what Sandy was saying, like that language, even though, when we reflect on it, and even though I might not have found offense in it or anything, or it was kind of that, I thought it was a compliment, but then when you kind of think about it, it's like, well, but I'm a woman that's just athletic, and I'm good at, I'm good at that, and it'd be just, nice to acknowledge that. I think one of the things as I kind of think about it comes to my head is we often say female athlete,
Yes.
and not male athlete.
Yes.
But it's almost like when somebody, so the presumption there is when someone says athlete, you're going to assume that's male, right? In terms of that language. So there's those little things like that. And they're, you know, they're, like I said, I'm even guilty of it. It's ingrained. It's just part of my language sometimes with, you know, being in a sport culture. But if you start to catch those things and just slowly change it, it makes a big difference. And that's going back to your earlier questions, even about girls and women involvement in sport and dropout rates. It's those little things that you might not think are affecting somebody, but it could lose that self-confidence of, well, do I have to be, you know, like the boys or whatnot to be able to be here and be welcome here? So even though, you know, that language might not be intentional, it's just, I think being aware of it and then changing it over time. You know, it's nice to like a little side story. It's at my cousin's little guy's lacrosse practice, and there's, I think, 3 or 4 girls out there, but predominantly little boys. And you've probably seen this in other sports settings too, where the coach, which typically are dads at that young age or at that age, or in a sport like lacrosse, but they'd say, okay, boys, and they kind of catch themselves, they're like, and girls type of thing, right? And sometimes they don't catch it, and then you just wonder, you know, how's that? My cousin's little guy's 5, right? So that's like a very young age to start, but there's those little things. And then, you know, as we talked about, as you grow and you're kind of involved in sport, and I think that's where the dropout comes in, is because, you know, if you start that young and you're hearing that language when you become, you know, 13 and you're going through your changes, you start to kind of question, like, you know, okay, I've been hearing this the last however many years I've been playing sports, and now, you know, your body's going through all this stuff and you're really starting to see physical differences, I think, in yourself compared to the boys, right? And so I think that can be a contributing factor to why that's kind of a critical age for sport participation for girls.
You know, you make a great point there, and language matters, especially like at any age group, but especially when you're talking about your entry level into sport and you're just looking around and it's a new experience and you take everything in, and there are all these little cues that say, like, I'm allowed to be here, but is anybody really in support of me being here? And there's a huge distinction between those two ideas. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time today and your thoughtful answers. I know that whoever has the opportunity to hear this recording is going to get so much out of it. Merci à toutes pour votre temps et votre réponse. Have a great rest of your day.